In an earlier movie, I showed you how you could limit a procedure's availability by placing it in a worksheet's code module, or make the procedure available to the entire workbook by placing it in a regular code module. The range of a procedure's visibility within a workbook is called its scope. You can also change how variables behave within your workbook by managing their scope. As an example, let's use the code in this workbook. I'll press Alt F11 to jump over to the Visual Basic Editor. When you declare a variable in a subroutine, that's the only subroutine that knows about it. As an example, both of these subroutines use the same variables, but the one I like to focus on is the rate. In this subroutine, I assign the value 0.05 or 5% to the rate. In the second subroutine, the bonus commission subroutine, I assign the value of 8% or 0.08. Now let's see what happens when I run the two subroutines. If I run the first one, based on the value in cell C7 on the commission worksheet, I get the value of 312.51. If I run the bonus commission subroutine, again using the same input value, I get a different result. It's higher and it reflects the 8% multiplier instead of only 5%. But what if you want to use the same variable in more than one subroutine and have that variable's current value carry over between subroutines? If you want to do that, you can declare it as what's called a global variable. You declare global variables at the top of a code module above the first subroutine or function in the declaration section. So if you go up here to the top, Excel will indicate that you are in the declaration section, and now you can create a global variable, and I will call it rate as currency. That means that I can delete these lines, or in this case, I'll just comment them out. So now that variable is not dimensioned or declared within the two subroutines. Instead, it's here as a global variable. The first subroutine should run exactly the same. In other words, we have the value of 05 defined. The first subroutine should run exactly as it did before. So if I press F5, we get the value of 312.51, which is this value here, the one in C7, multiplied by 5%. And the same thing will happen in the bonus commission subroutine. If I press F5, I get the value we had before. By declaring global variables at the top of the code module, I'm able to save time. Instead of redeclaring the variables every time I need them, I can just do it once. When there are only two subroutines, it's not a huge time savings, but if you have a lot of code and you're using the same variables over and over, then making them global variables can help quite a bit. What you can't do is assign a value to a global variable in the declaration section. So let me show you what happens. Press return and rate equals 0.05 and return. Excel accepts it as being in the declaration section. However, if I remove this line using a comment code and press F5, then I get an error. It says that you can't assign a value outside of a procedure. So if I click OK, remove this line, and assign the value of 0.05 to the currency rate again, and press F5 to run it, I get the value I expected. It's okay to use variables with the same names inside separate subroutines, but you need to be careful with your variable naming and usage when you introduce global variables. I personally use global variables sparingly, but they're a valuable tool to have in your programming toolkit.